So this a chat with Lilly Rai Smith for the Accidental Archivist Project, which was funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Ray, you go back to the early days of 33. So if you could speak for a little while just about, let your mind run wild, about when you first got involved with 33 and where that's led you on life's journey.
So, down a few rabbit holes, I would say. Paul, when did I get first involved with 33? I think it was in a theatre project with Spike and Wendy. And it was through theatre, which had been my first love, actually. I was a visual artist and I'd always wanted to move into theatre and make theatre sets. That was my first thing when I was probably about 17 maybe, and I'm 60 now, so that's a long time ago. And so through the theatre workshops and the working in community, it just felt like a space to be. It was thriving, it was buzzing, it was full of creative people. There was a cafe, so you could always go and just talk to other creative people about what they were doing. So there were sort of two things that I wanted to mention about 33, and one was the career progression, which is like a very organic thing. So I moved from the theatre workshops to, I then worked for, not for 33, but for a Luton Community Arts team in the museum and painting murals in town. And that was through the connection with 33. I sat on the board of trustees, so I was quite young, like maybe 20. I don't know actually. And that gave me experience of formal boards and management. So throughout my life I've also been a non-executive director for various companies, including like housing associations. So that really is you learn something and then you can take it with you. In terms of visual arts, I had I think I was which may have been a funded position, the Bedfordshire Artist Collective, and so also that was an introduction to collectives and the way that community can come together and form structures to work in the community. So I'd never heard of a collective before. Then as a visual artist, I went off and travelled through China. That was in 1989, and I had what is called a multimedia exhibition at 33. And I remember that because I'd gone in and I kind of said, right, I had all these photographs. In 1989, I'd ended up in Tiananmen Square, and they'd declared martial law, so there's all these politics. At that time, I'd already been working for 33 Film and Video, so I'd gone from visual arts to learning about audio recording in the studio to training with 33 Film and Video. So I had video, I had paintings, I had the photographs that I'd taken, and I'd gone into 33, and it was the organic use of space, because I'd said, I'd like to put an exhibition together. And I was just offered space, and it was like, well, we've got a basement, you'll have to clean it, but you can use that space. So it was in a very organic way, and I went round town raising funds, literally raising funds from shopkeepers and things. And then from there, I had funded exhibitions, so it was very organic. And from 33 Film and Video, I went to work in the West End of London, so I'd put together a tape at 33 Film and Video, who pioneered scratch video. So I'd put together a scratch video tape and just sent it out to companies. And I don't know how many, maybe I sent 15 tapes out. I had something like 9 offers of interview. I had half a dozen interviews, and I got a job in the West End. So a very organic progression from learning. And I remember also people having ideas that needed funding, and literally sitting down with Paul and sitting down with Mun, sitting down with Gavin, and writing on the back of envelopes and beer mats about what this funding application might look like and what this project might look like. It was a very organic space, and I think that's, one thing is the career trajectory. So in terms of from the West End of London, I moved to the West Country. I helped found a community media centre, and I was still a filmmaker for years, and then we had funding from South West Screen. So what I learned at 33 was how to write funding applications, how to talk to funders, and how to make things happen. But it all happened in a very organic, supportive, fertile way that somehow doesn't seem to happen anymore. And I don't really know why.
Do you think that's the change of the way that things are funded, or do you think it's like how projects like that become formal parts? I always talk about top-down funding and bottom-up funding and how that's changed the way community gets involved.
I think it's definitely to do with the way that things are funded and what's funded. So now there seems to be, it's top-down funding, but you need to also tick the boxes that you're bringing the community to the table, so the funders can tick the box to say they're embracing community, whereas it used to happen organically. And for artists, that's really, really important. And it's really important that you can cross-pollinate with other artists, because that sort of multimedia environment, it doesn't surprise me that lots of people seemed to go through 33 into music and film industries, and it's not just because of the skills that were learnt, but because you're used to sitting talking to people who, maybe there's a visual artist, maybe there's a musician, and so film can embrace all of those creative skill sets and people, and it was that fertility. But the other thing actually that I wanted to talk about was being female, and it being a completely egalitarian and safe space. Like, I never once experienced misogyny or anything. Like, nobody, in fact I don't even know if I did feel like a female, but it didn't matter. It didn't make any difference what sex you were, what race you were, or everybody. It actually, what mattered was what you were bringing to the table creatively, or how you were, what you were doing. Really, that's what mattered. And I was involved in the women's dance circle, and so that kept me fit as well. But the dance was really interesting, because I'd never thought of myself as a dancer, and then actually there I was 2 and 3 times a week in a very small but open drop-in session with a core group of dancers, and really pushing ourselves, and that expression with body, I think, is really important. So there was that connection with space, and the physicality. I think that's missing now. We're all looking at iPads, and I'm just looking at. But then the other thing I really actually wanted to touch on was not to be scared of technology, because at 33 I'd learnt about audio recording, because there was a music studio, and this is all technology. I'd gone off to work for a film company, so I moved from being a visual artist into being an animator, and that uses technology. And I'm so old that we were really excited that we could make an interactive CD-ROM for educational purposes. Like, you clicked on the screen and it changed. So it doesn't feel really old saying that. So I don't think technology is something to be scared of. I think it's just a tool, because human creativity is something else entirely. Human creativity can use different technologies. And we just have to, I think, in one sense, embrace it, but not forget that we are the creators. So actually what I felt about 33 is that we didn't use language like we're co-creating a space. It just was taken for granted that people were co-creating a space. You didn't have to use the rhetoric because that's what was happening. And what you find now is people will write down, we're co-creating a project. It just seems like, well, why? Of course you are. If you have a group of creative people together making a project, that's what's happening. So we're kind of using this rhetoric. It's almost replacing the organic nature of what used to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's about, do you feel that just having a space which is open facilitates that kind of way of working?
Yes, yeah, and it was open. A lot of us say if bands rehearsed there, or bands would. I remember going back from gigs where people were just dropping off kit in the middle of the night. It's an open space, and I think for artists, there were always other creatives to talk to, no matter what time of day or night, or whether it was weekend or evening. And it was a fertile bed for creativity. It's really important to have those spaces.
That experience seems to have impacted on your life. So what's your journey been since those days in terms of your own career?
Well, it's huge and it's interesting. So I think I moved from being a visual artist to being an animator, working in a film company in London on special effects. Then in a way like paying it forward, so when I moved to another part of the country, helping to set up a media space with the same ethos, an organic ethos, and that was in Somerset, and that is still running. That's called the Engine Room. It's run by Somerset Film and Video, and I think they're probably of the same age and generation. That allowed, somehow, it's definitely to do with funding, but you can't really separate arts from politics, I feel. I remember, so we are talking about the era of Thatcher, so your content for a lot of creativity, we might have had the miners' strike or things like that. Obviously at 33 there were a lot of punk bands, and I think the lyrics there are coming from politics. So it's about freedom of expression as well. But mainly it was about being in an organic creative community, and it was a fertile, we have, nowadays you might recently, we've had funded streams called, test beds. It was an organic test bed. That's what happened. And then if you had a creative urge, you were encouraged to then find funding for training. So as an animator, I then trained through 33 Film and Video, and then because of that I then trained in studio audio production, which is not my thing, but to actually then understand and respect what everyone else is bringing to the table is also equally important. So there was formal training, and you've got your little certificates and what have you, which help with your CV and your career progression, and things like the sitting on the board of trustees helped with my career progression, because then I became independent non-executive director in other companies, and so all of that helps with career progression in a very organic way. I know very few people of my age who went to university to study arts, and having said that, I was accepted on a fine art degree and I just chose not to go because I didn't need to do that, because I was already working in the arts, and I come from a working class background, so you've always got one eye on the how am I going to earn a living. So it was when I said I didn't need to as an artist, I would have benefited from going to fine art college as an artist. But that's the other thing about Luton, is that it was a working class town, and it didn't occur to me that a fine artist could earn a living. I mean, now I realise I could have done, and that was the way I was brought up. So I think what 33 did was offer people opportunity who I didn't perceive myself as being stuck in a class system, but retrospectively looking back, I was. And so what it offered is people who were stuck in those systems, or people for whom education in school wasn't really working. It did work for me, but lots of people it didn't work for. And what 33 offered was just this even keel, this organic, fertile space. That it wasn't, oh, have you got a degree, or have you done this, or it was just, you're all bringing yourself to the table, because we are all co-creators, and that was respected.
That's really interesting. I mean, a few people have said to me that their experience with 33 and what they did afterwards, the initial thing with 33, it was like a sliding doors moment, that you passed into a realm of possibilities that was just there. No one talked about it really. It was just, as you said earlier, organic.
Yeah, it kind of opened my perception to being able to embrace creativity in everyday life. It just opened my perception to politics, to senses of belonging, to feeling safe as a woman, to being able to work in a multimedia environment. So yeah, I think it's almost like the opportunities were endless, and the community, it's very, very much missed. I know we had a space for visual arts, so there was a gallery, there was a film company, there was theatre space, there was a recording studio, and there were always people, cross-pollinating. So my career took me through 33 film and video into the film industry, but what I've taken, the legacy I've really taken, is that sense of belonging, and that those organic spaces are really important. That's really the legacy of what I've taken, because we all get to this, I'm 60 now, and we all get to this age where we kind of go, you can be at the top of your career, it's just a career. What I really learned was about humanity, and collaboration and respect, and what are they now? You can't put your finger on the value of that, actually.
No, it's interesting. What I know about you is that some things have come full circle. You're doing creative things, working with developing incense and really kind of spiritual things. And so there is a kind of a full circle, isn't there? A circular way of people's lives.
Yes, there is, and I think this whole I don't really want to use the word egalitarian again, because it sounds too formal, but this idea of creating safe spaces. So I'm now run a CIC called the Green Lotus Lounge, and it's really a safe space, and I say it's a safe space for healing, because the world really needs healing right now, but it's not just about that, it's about having a safe space, and I think that's what 33 was. It never occurred to us to use that rhetoric. You didn't think, oh, I'm going to 33 because it's a safe space. People didn't use that language. People went because it felt safe.
Yeah. No, that's a common thread through a lot of people I've spoken to, and certainly at the time we didn't think about it. We didn't pigeonhole people, and have these kind of broader terms. But that's what happens, and that's the legacy, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what's happened. Maybe I do remember. Actually, I remember speaking to the man Azik about this. So this is going off slightly at a political tangent. There was funding for a Black Arts Festival, and the man Azik, who was a big Rastafarian DJ, he had written a brief for visual artists to come up with billboard posters and whatnot. And he asked me to submit some work, and clearly, I'm not black, so clearly. And he said to me, it's all going, in front of a board anonymously. I'm just going to put your work in there because I think you're the best. And I did get chosen. And he said, wait for it, we'll have a backlash. And the point he was making is that funding the arts in a segregated way is, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to the community. It's not helpful to the artists. It's not helpful to it wasn't helpful to the festival, So, and I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, it's really reflected now where communities are separated much more than they used to be.
And, it has this, I don't think, Luton is a super diverse town, so we're all ticking the box going, oh, we're a super diverse town, but actually I left the town for about 25 years, and when I came back, it's more super diverse on paper, but I feel the segregation, and I don't know why. I was talking to someone the other day about this, and they asked me, did I think the segregation has happened organically? Or, is it more socially engineered? And I'm sort of thinking, I don't think it was socially engineered in that sense. And Luton is a very transient town, and it's not unique to Luton, it's happening all over. Somehow there is more segregation. And so funding can address this, but at the moment it's addressing it through it is like a computerized system of keywords. Oh, look, that's a diverse project, but it's not, because what we haven't got is safe spaces where organically creativity happens. A lot of the creativity and a lot of the projects, I think, arose from in 33 because there was a cafe, and you'd just go down the cafe, and you would be hanging out with other creative people and just talking about, what are you up to? I'm recording this music, or what have you been doing? I've been doing this. And then out of that, out of those organic connections, projects happened, multimedia projects happened. And I don't see that happening.
No.
And it is to do with funding. It's probably to do with education as well, though. The arts in schools are just not being funded, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think, this project that we've been working on is called the Accidental Archivist, and I think the accidents aren't there anymore. It's very hard you can't engineer accidents, but you need the opportunity for accidents to happen, and I think that's gone out of society generally at the moment.
Now I kind of feel like I ought to make some grand statement about what we can do about it. I have no idea. I have no answers. I have no idea. So, going through 33 opened my eyes to politics. It opened my eyes to a sense of belonging. It opened my eyes to working with other creatives. It opened my eyes to the possibility that actually being a creative had a career path. It's only retrospectively now I can see that path, and I do feel that people nowadays are very shuffled into I went to college, so I studied graphic design because I wanted to go to art college, and my parents said, people like us don't do things like that, came from a working class background, and it's like you can't go swanning off to art college. And sadly I think that we're living in that era again, where only privileged people have the privilege to be creative, and yet it's creativity and the abundance of creativity that forms community, that forms society, and forms well-being. We're talking about mental health and well-being, but we're not really addressing the fact that these things happen organically. The first thing that needs to happen is people have to have a safe space, and that's what 33 was. Nobody ever laughed. Like, if you had an idea, people were not going to put you down. They were going to go, yeah, how can you make that happen? How can we help you make that happen? And it would either come to fruition or it wouldn't. I think for every project I was involved with that came to fruition, you probably had another 100 ideas that didn't, but you didn't think about that. You know, it wasn't like, oh, well, you had a daft idea. No, it was, how can you make this happen? There was a real kind of, that was the energy. That was the energy of the place. Building was falling down around people.
Yes, absolutely.
Which also kind of goes to show that you don't need expensive modern buildings. You don't need millions of pounds of buildings to make a creative community. But you need to support artists. Yeah.
I guess to kind of round it all up a bit, Ray, I feel that, you know, the lack of arts education in schools, the lack of opportunity, just re-emphasises the fact that society is very scared of creativity in terms of the way it can change people. And, you know, that's a very sad place to be in after all these years.
Yeah, I think there is a shift happening in society. I don't think it's all dystopian doom and gloom, because I think people are creative. We are inherently creative beings, and you can't repress that out of people. So there will be, it goes in ebbs and waves. There has to be the emergence of that in humanity, because creativity is intrinsically linked with humanity. And one of the other things at 33, it was about pushing the envelope of what defined art, you know, which again I think is speaking of the time, isn't it? Yeah. Coming out of the 70s and 80s, it's like what defined art. And that doesn't seem to be done anymore either, that really pushing of creative boundaries. And my art now is incense making, and I can say the art of incense making. I compose incense. That's really pushing the boundary, isn't it? Really pushing the sort of the nuance of composition. I don't compose music, I compose incense, but I'm using my sense of smell. It's an it's an entirely different kind of creativity, but it's still a creativity, and I feel that I think the legacy of 33 was really like you could do anything. That, you know, you could say, oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah, so you have come full circle.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing now is you're creating something which is shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's co-created.
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, and it crosses those things. So I was just actually telling Paul earlier that composing an incense is like writing a letter or writing a poem. I have actually started making an incense by writing a poem before. And then I was taught incense making by Peter Neumann, and he would say, you know, writing an incense, composing an incense is like writing a letter. And then he would light the incense, and this is the sense of smell, and then encourage someone to interpret the incense through dance, and then having danced the incense, as the audience, we can write down what the letter was. And it's always spot on. It's spot on because you have used the sense of smell and then physical interpretation. And that's, to me, that is a multimedia art piece. So I think the legacy was that cross-pollination of arts. No one said, oh yes, you're a musician, you've got grade 8 and you have to stick to being a musician. You know, that person could then have said, well, actually I want to do this and I want to do that to the same skill level. And then career paths happen organically, quite organically that way.
Yeah. That's been fantastic. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and onwards and upwards, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Where's the next generation? Where is it happening?